Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We're back in Thetis Harbor today to put together this large aquarium-esque lagoon for our newly arrived marine reptile. Lagoons can easily feel like they all look the same, and so my hope is that this looks like something you don't see all that often in the game. As always, if you enjoy Jurassic World Evolution 3 content or seeing prehistoric animals on your screen, I always appreciate when you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which prehistoric creatures you'd like to see featured in future builds. But today, let's jump into the park and start building our Liopleurodon and Kronosaurus home in Jurassic World Evolution 3. Okay, so the first thing we need to do here is we need to establish the footprint for this lagoon. One of the challenges with marine reptiles in Jurassic World Evolution 3 is that it's really easy to draw a giant body of water, throw some viewing galleries around it, and then call it a day. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but I want this building to feel a lot different. And so the idea that I want here is I want to have an entrance building that people can go into and they can learn more about the animals, and then we'll be able to go in and then actually get a view underwater of what the Liopleurodon and the Kronosaurus look like in their habitat. So we're not going to be using any of the traditional viewing galleries. There's just going to be that remote gallery that we're going to have out on the far side of the actual lagoon itself. A lot of the building inside is not going to be accessed from guests, or at least that we can see. So we just need to build the entrance area, and then we're going to build the perimeter around the rest of the building. It would be fun to do more on the inside of it, but I always want to make sure I'm being cognizant of the complexity meter since we are doing this on PlayStation. And so being up against that at the end of any kind of an island makes things incredibly challenging. So I'm trying to make sure that we're being responsible with how we're using all these building materials and building tools and not going too crazy. That being said, this does end up being a building that includes just over 11,000 building pieces to put together. And part of that is just because of how large it actually is and trying to fully cover the entirety of the lagoon. So that being said, it would be great to put something like this up on the workshop. We're not going to be able to do that. Even if I tried to split it into two, it wasn't really letting me. So this is not something that I'm able to actually put on the workshop as I'm getting more into doing things like that. So for that, I do apologize. But for finding things like this, where I'm going to put some lights under the floor here and try to have some lights that come into it, I do not, because this was really cool. The original plan was to have these lights that will be on during the day and the night with the update we're getting next week. But I can't actually test that here, so instead I'll have to look and go into capture mode to turn everything dark and see what it looks like at night underwater in this space here. And the effect, as you'll see later, is really cool. It wasn't something that I'd planned to look exactly the way that it does. But having the lights and looking down into the lagoon underwater is a really cool effect that I really like how it turns out in the end here. We're going to have our main entrance space here, and then again, we're just going to build out the entrance halls as you're coming into the lagoon. So there's going to be one space there for the lagoon hatchery, and then on the other side, that's going to be that remote viewing gallery. And then we'll use a couple different planer boxes on both sides of this to try to give it a little more color. We'll have a little bit of foliage on both sides of this, and we'll do a few things on the sides to put some lights, some artwork, and a couple different things here. I don't use a ton of these kinds of signs, and I haven't used them in really any of our parks, so I'm going to bring these back here for parts of this Malta of Thetis Harbor and try to give it something that's a little more unique and different to this park compared to the other ones. One thing that I really like to try to do is make sure that all these parks feel a little bit unique and a little bit different, and they're all something that I can go to and not feel like I'm looking at the same exact thing in 10 different parks here. So hopefully we're able to accomplish that. If you have other ideas or tips to make this feel a little more appropriate to Malta or places like this, I've never been, so I'd love any feedback or any thoughts on how to integrate anything else to make this even better. We're going to have a glass dome that's going to go on the back side of this, and again, we're just going to do that by having some of the glass roof panels and then running those in a half circle around the outside of this, and then deleting a ton of the extra pieces that we don't need to try to save up on the piece count here. I'm going to have these large circle fan support pieces under the building as well. I don't want to feel like it just floats over the top of everything. Of the water, and so it has some things that are trying to support the entire building and structure that's going over the water. And that's part of the effect that, as you'll see later, was really fun to see when the Liopleurodons or the Kronosaurus are swimming around in the darker at night. The outside of the dome, I'm going to have to open up a little bit on one side here, and that's just going to be so that the fish feeders can actually be accessible to maintenance teams and rangers. I guess rangers, one of them needs to be there for it, and I'm not paying attention to quite who it needs to be. But so we're going to open up part of that, and then to try to bring it all together on that side, we're going to have some of this rock that's going to go around the interior of that lagoon and hide part of the lagoon wall on that outside. So it still feels like part of that's going into the rock itself. On the outside, we've already got the main structure of what the lagoon's going to look like. So now we're going to start building out some guest seating areas on the outside here. So we're going to have 2 on both sides of that entrance here. That's going to have 2 doors that people could go into from a little bit higher up. And then we also are going to have a ton of different seating out here for our guests to be able to sit. As you can see, the platform is a little bit higher than the rest of the floor under it. So we're going to end up using a couple of stairs to go from the bottom where people can actually walk up to the top here, and then having a bunch of seating up there is going to help to create the illusion that guests can be up there. We don't have any updates in Jurassic World Evolution 3 to have us so that our guests can actually take stairs, unfortunately, so we're going to have to just get creative and pretend that we can do those things. I'm getting really comfortable with the snapping tool, and I wish I'd learned this earlier to use this way more, because it's going to help a lot more as I'm trying to move quickly through things and also make sure that they're perfectly connected. Particularly with things like this where I'm trying to move around and trying to put different pieces together and building some of these planter boxes. So like I said, we're going to put a few different tables here for seating. I'm going to try not to go too crazy, even though I'm incentivized and inclined to put a ton of different seats here. But we're going to have it just a little bit more limited here. And then we're going to have some of these fountains here. We're just going to put a bunch of shrubs and foliage inside all 4 of those. We're going to try to match them a little bit, but not perfectly on both sides. And then the planter boxes, we obviously need to fill up a lot of those. And sometimes when I'm moving fast, I forget to put those in there. I have a bridge that's going over the top of the Plesiosaur and Adverosaurus lagoon that I still haven't put a bunch of the foliage or signage on that side of it, but definitely want to make sure that we get to that in the future. So for some reason, and I don't actually know why, when you're looking at some of the walls here and the brick walls that we have on the outside of the building, you can tell where the split is between each of the building pieces. So to try to combat that and make this have a little more dimension, we're going to have these wall pieces of column that are going to go on the sides of this here. I think it looks really cool, but admittedly, the first reason that I wanted to do this was because I hate seeing the little lines that come through the front of these build pieces. But I'm really happy with why it are like doing it, because I feel like it just makes this feel like much more of a real building instead of just straight walls. The top of the building here, I want to have an additional structure here, and this is going to be more for storage or anything else that you'd put in an aquarium on a second story that I'm not entirely sure about because I don't visit a ton of aquariums. But we're going to have something on the top of this here, and it's going to go up a couple levels. I've changed the color on this roof here to more of this like seafoam green washed color, and I'm really happy with the color that ended up looking like. I feel like this matches more of the vibe that I'm going for in this harbor, and then again we're just taking it up one additional layer. I'm gonna have some bricks on the sides of this as well to try to bring that into the actual roof and connect those, because there's a slight gap whenever you're doing something like this, so I'm trying to combat that on the side. But basically I'm really happy with putting that together and having that additional dimension, even if none of that's actually going to be accessible to guests or staff from a like game function using space. I need to make sure that the top of this doesn't just feel like it's completely bare. And so we're going to be putting a bunch of different props up here to try to give it a little bit more stuff here. And because this is a really large aquarium, I feel like it's going to need a ton of different things to actually function properly. And so we're going to have a bunch of storage units up top. Eventually I'll put in some more like solar panels that I haven't done, or maybe I'll just leave that alone. But then we'll put some like generators and some air conditioning units and some other stuff up here, to try to make sure that the top of this doesn't feel like it's completely bare, but also doesn't feel like I'm just throwing a ton of just random garbage to make this feel like it's complete. We're almost done with this here, so we're just going to add a couple of different windows and a few different things to the top of this, and then we'll play with the interior of the actual lagoon. So I'm going to move some of these seaweed or kelp pieces here, and then we'll pair those together, bunch them up, and then we're just going to take those in the little lines and in chunks around the inside of this here. I don't want to feel like this just looks like a body of water and nothing inside it, so we'll have some kelp, and then we'll have a few different fossils or pieces of eaten dinosaur to wrap this up. And with that, our Liopleurodon and Kronosaurus Aquarium Lagoon is complete. I'm really happy with how this one turned out, creating something that feels more like a dedicated aquarium complex than just another lagoon in Thetis Harbor. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more Jurassic World Evolution 3 builds. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next build.